All right, picture the scene. It's late, maybe you can't sleep, and you flip on the TV to one of those 24-hour news channels.
We all know the ones.
Exactly. And the breaking news graphic is flashing, red and urgent. The music is all dramatic. And on the screen, there's a panel.
Yeah.
The usual suspects. 3 or 4 very serious-looking people in expensive suits.
Right. And they all have these very impressive titles scrolling underneath their names.
Oh, absolutely. Senior strategic analyst, distinguished fellow, they've got maps behind them, charts. And they are telling you with just absolute 100% conviction exactly what's going to happen next.
In the Middle East, with the stock market, the next election, you name it.
They know it all. Now, I want you to imagine that sitting in that 4th chair, right next to the person with the PhD in geopolitics, is a chimpanzee.
It's a regular chimp.
A regular chimp. And this chimp has a dartboard. And the dartboard has the same options the experts are debating. War, peace, recession, boom. The chimp just rears back and throws a dart. And here's the question that has, I think, haunted social science for 20 years. Who should you trust?
The distinguished fellow. Or the chimp.
It's an incredible image.
It is. It's provocative, it's funny, but it's also, I think, deeply unsettling for a lot of people. And it's the image that basically launched 1,000 angry op-eds back in the day.
Well, today, we are diving deep into what I honestly think is one of the most ego-shattering pieces of research in maybe human history. We're talking about the dart-throwing chimp.
It all comes from the work of Philip Tetlock, specifically his huge 20-year study that was all collected in the book, Expert Political Judgment.
But we're not just looking at the original book from 2005, we're looking at all of it. The updates, the fallout, and really why this matters so much right now in 2026.
And we have to set the stage here properly, because when Tetlock released this data, it wasn't just some academic paper that got filed away in a dusty library.
Oh, no. It was a cultural bomb.
It really was.
I mean, the media went bananas, pun. Absolutely intent. I remember the headlines. They were brutal. Experts are useless. Your broker is dumber than a monkey. It just became this cultural meme.
It was a taunt. If you were a pundit, an intelligence analyst, an economist, this was the metric you were suddenly being beaten over the head with.
It just stripped the armor right off the expert class.
It did. But, and this is what we're going to get into, the headline, while it was super catchy, it actually missed the real point.
Okay.
The point wasn't that experts are stupid. The point was that the task, the actual job of predicting the future, is infinitely harder than anyone, and especially the experts themselves, really wanted to admit.
I have to be honest with you, though. When I first heard about this, back when it made that big splash, my first reaction was just total skepticism. I thought, come on.
That's a very normal reaction.
You're telling me that someone who has studied the Soviet Union for 30 years, who speaks fluent Russian, who knows every single historical detail, you're telling me they know nothing more about the future of Russia than a primate throwing random darts?
It feels wrong, doesn't it?
It feels arrogant to even suggest that. It feels like some kind of statistical trick.
And that's a completely fair reaction. And honestly, if the finding was just experts know nothing, we wouldn't be doing a deep dive on it.
Right.
We just say, don't listen to experts and, wrap it up. But the reality is so much more nuanced. This isn't a story about how dumb experts are. It's a story about how the human brain, even a really brilliant brain, is just wired to see patterns that aren't actually there. It's about the nature of randomness itself.
And it's about this struggle between 2 huge philosophical ideas, right? You call them radical skepticism and meliorism.
Meliorism, yeah, it's a bit of a $5 word, I know.
Break that down for me.
It's basically just the optimistic belief that we can get better, that through effort, through better thinking, we can improve. So the tension in all this research is between the skeptics, who are basically saying, the world is chaos, just give up, and the meliorists, who are saying, no, wait, we can learn to do this better, but we have to change how we think.
And the stakes here. I mean, this isn't just about winning a bet on the Super Bowl or something.
No, not at all. We are talking about life and death. I mean, just look at the last 25 years, the intelligence assessments about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
A massive, massive failure.
Catastrophic failure. Or the universal failure of economists to predict the 2008 financial meltdown.
Nobody saw it coming.
Almost nobody. And then you have the shock of the Brexit vote, the 2016 election. I mean, the list goes on. These weren't just little oops moments. These were failures of expert judgment that cost trillions of dollars and, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of lives.
Right. I mean, if the experts on TV are wrong, it's just annoying. But if the experts in the Pentagon or at the Federal Reserve are wrong,
The world burns.
Yeah.
Precisely. We need a way to, keep score. In almost every other field, there's a scoreboard. In sports, you know who won the game. In the stock market, you know if your portfolio went up or down. It's clear.
But in politics and geopolitical forecasting?
We have this terrible habit of just forgetting. An expert makes some huge, bold prediction it turns out to be spectacularly wrong, and then 2 weeks later, they're right back on TV, making another prediction with the exact same level of confidence.
And nobody calls them on it.
Nobody calls them on it. Tetlock's work is about stopping that cycle. It's about bringing some rigor to a field that has, for way too long, just been running on vibes.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because I think before we can even decide if someone is a good forecaster, we have to agree on what good even looks like. And apparently that right there is the first huge stumbling block.
It is surprisingly slippery.
It seems like nobody actually wants to define what a good prediction is.
Well, when Tetlock started this research way back in the 80s, he went to these policy elites, people at the CIA, the State Department, top universities, and he asked them a very simple question. How do you define good political judgment?
And the answers were?
They were mushy. They were really mushy. They were circular. They'd say things like, well, good judgment is having a deep, intuitive understanding of the historical forces at play.
Okay, but how do you measure that? How do you put a number on intuitive understanding?
You can't. It's the classic, I know it when I see it definition. It's totally subjective.
The sources call this the relativist challenge, which I guess is just a fancy way of saying, if I agree with your politics, I think you have good judgment.
That is exactly what it is. I mean, imagine you're a hawk in foreign policy. You believe in military strength as the primary tool.
Okay.
If a fellow hawk predicts that bombing a country will lead to peace, and instead it leads to a total quagmire, you don't say they had bad judgment. You say they had prudent resolve, but were, undermined by other factors.
But if a dove says diplomacy will work and it fails,
then the hawk says, see, bad judgment. That's just naive appeasement.
so judgment becomes a team sport. It's not about accuracy at all. It's about signaling that you're on the right team.
Exactly right. And you cannot run a scientific study on tribal signaling. It's impossible. So Tetlock had to find a way to bypass all of that. He had to set up rigorous objective tests, and he broke it down into two main categories: correspondence and coherence.
Okay, let's drill into these correspondence. This sounds like the reality check.
Yes. Correspondence is the empiricism test. It's very simple. It asks, did your map actually match the territory? If you predicted that the Soviet Union would collapse by 1993, and it did, you have high correspondence.
You got it right.
You got it right.
That seems fair enough. Did the thing happen? Yes or no?
You'd think so, but experts hate this metric. They absolutely hate it because reality is messy, and they don't want to be judged by a simple pass-fail.
So they retreat to the second metric, coherence.
They retreat to coherence. This is the logic test. It's not about being right about the world. It's about being consistent in your own head. Is your argument consistent? Do you treat similar cases the same way?
So, for example, if you believe that big government deficits cause runaway inflation.
Do you believe that every time? Or do you only believe it when the other political party is in power and running up the deficit?
I see. So you can have a perfectly coherent argument. It makes total logical sense. It's internally consistent. But it can still be dead wrong about what happens in the real world.
Exactly. You can be logically beautiful and empirically disastrous. And this brings us to what I think is the most fascinating psychological finding in the early part of the study, the close call defense.
Oh, I love this part. This is where the psychology gets so relatable. Because I do this. I absolutely do this with sports. If my team loses in the last minute on a bad call,
Right.
I don't say we were the worst team. I say we almost won. The ref blew that call. If the ball had just bounced 1 inch to the left, we would have won.
We all do it. It's a defense mechanism. It's how we protect our ego. But when political experts do it, it makes it impossible for them to learn from their mistakes. Tetlock found that when experts got a prediction wrong, even a massive one, they almost never just admitted they were wrong.
He claimed they were almost right.
He claimed they were almost right.
Okay, let's use the Soviet Union example because
Yeah.
the source material goes really deep here, and it's a perfect case. This was arguably the biggest geopolitical event of the second half of the 20th century.
No question.
And most Western experts, the so-called Sovietologists, completely missed it. They thought the USSR was stable, that it would last for decades more.
That was the consensus view, absolutely.
So when it collapsed, did they go, wow, my entire model of the world was broken?
Very, very few did. The vast majority doubled down. They used what Tetlock calls the close call counterfactual.
Okay, what does that mean?
They argued that their analysis was correct. The Soviet system was stable, just like they said. But then, a series of freak, unpredictable events happened. The hardliner coup against Gorbachev in 1991, for example, failed. Gorbachev himself was this unique, almost alien figure in Soviet history.
So they're saying it was a fluke.
They're saying it was a massive fluke.
Mhm.
They argued that if you could run history 100 times, in 99 of those timelines, the coup succeeds, the hardliners crack down, and the Soviet Union stays together for another 20 years. We just happen to be living in the one weird timeline where it fell apart.
That is maddening. That's basically saying I was right in the multiverse, just not in this particular universe.
It's completely maddening, and it's unfalsifiable. How can you possibly prove them wrong? You can't visit those other universes. It's a get-out-of-jail-free card that allows the expert to maintain their status as a genius, even though their prediction was totally useless to anyone actually living in the real world.
And we do the exact opposite to our opponents, right?
Yeah.
If the other side gets a prediction wrong, we don't grant them the close call excuse.
Not a chance.
We say, see, they're idiots. Their whole worldview is flawed.
Exactly. We judge ourselves by our intentions and our almosts, but we judge others by their strict, cold results. Tetlock realized that if he let experts get away with this close call defense, the whole project would be pointless.
He had to look at the hard data.
He had to look at the hard data. But before we even get to the tournament results, we have to spend some time with the skeptics again. Because there is a very strong, very scientific argument that says Tetlock's whole quest was doomed from the very start.
This is the radical skepticism section. This is the argument that the world isn't just hard to predict, it's actually impossible. It's fundamentally chaos.
Right. This is what's called ontological skepticism. Ontology is the philosophical study of the nature of being, the nature of reality. So an ontological skeptic says, the very nature of our world is randomness. There are no laws of history. There is no script. It's all just stuff happening.
And to explain this, the sources use this great analogy called Pauli's urn. Now, I'll be honest, when I first saw the name, I thought it was some kind of ancient Greek tragedy.
It does sound a bit like that.
But it's a probability model. Can you walk us through this? I want to make sure I really get the implications.
Absolutely. So imagine a big glass jar, an urn. It's empty. Now, I place two balls inside. One is red and one is green.
Okay, one red, one green, 50-50 shot.
Exactly. You can't see inside. You reach in and you pick one ball.
Okay, I reach in and I pull out the red ball.
Okay. Now, here's the crucial rule of the game. You put the red ball back in the jar. But because you picked red, you now add a second red ball to the jar.
Ah, okay, so now the jar has two reds and one green.
Precisely. The odds have shifted. It was 50-50. Now it's, what, a 2 in 3 chance of picking red. It's 66% red.
Right.
So now you draw again.
And the chances are I'm going to pick red again.
Let's say you do. You put it back and you add another red ball. So now you have 3 reds and 1 green. The urn is rapidly filling up with red. If we keep playing this game for an hour, eventually the jar is going to be, 99% red.
And anyone looking at that jar later would just say, oh, this is a red jar. It was obviously always meant to be red.
But it wasn't. If you had just happened to pick green on that very first draw, which was a 50-50 coin flip, the whole process would have gone in the other direction. We'd be adding green balls. The jar would be green.
That's a powerful idea. That's path dependency.
That's path dependency. The final state of the jar, whether it's red or green, is determined by a tiny random event at the very, very beginning. History, the skeptics argue, is just like that urn. A small accident, a wrong turn, a delayed train. These are the first balls drawn from the urn. They set us on a path that reinforces itself, making the final outcome look totally inevitable in hindsight, when in fact it was completely random at the start.
This sounds a lot like the butterfly effect.
It's the exact same concept, just from a different field. It comes from complexity theory. The classic example in history that everyone points to is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which kicked off World War I.
Right. The story of the driver who took a wrong turn.
Yes. Most people don't know the full story. The initial assassination attempt earlier that day had actually failed. A bomb was thrown, but it bounced off the Archduke's car. He was safe. The whole thing was a bust.
He was on his way home.
He was going home. But his driver, who was unfamiliar with the new route, made a wrong turn down a side street in Sarajevo. He realized his mistake and tried to reverse the car. The car stalled.
You can't make this stuff up.
And it stalled right in front of Gavrilo Princip, one of the assassins, who was sitting at a cafe, probably thinking he'd failed his mission. He looks up, sees the Archduke sitting there, a sitting duck in a stalled car, and he just walks over and shoots him.
And because of that one stalling engine, we get World War I, which leads to the collapse of 4 empires, the rise of Hitler, World War II, the Cold War, the moon landing, the internet. I mean, you can draw a line from that stalled car to us sitting here right now.
That is the ontological skeptic's entire argument in a nutshell. How can you possibly build a predictive model for car stalls in Sarajevo? You can't. It's pure noise. And if history turns on noise, then prediction is a fool's errand.
And then you add the human element on top of that. Game theory. The sources mention the Sherlock Holmes versus Moriarty problem. I love this because it perfectly captures that feeling of just overthinking something into a knot.
It's the infinite regress problem. So Holmes is trying to escape his arch-nemesis, Moriarty. He gets on a train to Dover because he's planning to cross the Channel to France. He thinks, Moriarty is a genius. He knows I want to go to France, so he will definitely be waiting for me at Dover. Therefore, I should get off one stop early at Canterbury.
Okay, that's a smart move. Outthinking the enemy.
But then Holmes thinks again, wait, Moriarty knows that I am smart. He knows that I know that he expects me at Dover, so he will anticipate that I will try to get off at Canterbury, so he will actually be waiting for me at Canterbury. Therefore, my best move is to stay on the train all the way to Dover.
But then Moriarty knows that Holmes knows that Moriarty knows that Holmes knows. My head is starting to hurt.
And that's the point. When you have two rational actors who are both trying to outguess each other, there is no single correct answer. The outcome becomes mathematically indeterminate. And in politics, you have entire nations trying to outguess each other constantly. If we build this missile, they'll build that shield, so maybe we should build a bomber instead. It creates these feedback loops that are inherently, fundamentally unpredictable.
Okay, but the example that really drove this home for me, the one that made me think, okay, maybe the skeptics are 100% right, was the plane crash investigation, the NTSB story of Western Flight 903.
Ah, yes. This is such a crucial concept. It highlights the massive difference between explaining the past and predicting the future.
So what happened with that flight?
Western Flight 903 crashed while landing in Mexico City in 1979. It was a terrible tragedy. The NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, did what they always do, a massive, painstaking investigation to find out the cause.
And it wasn't just one single thing, right? It wasn't like the left wing fell off.
No, it never is. It was a perfect storm of small, mundane problems. The pilot was fatigued because of a last-minute schedule change. The co-pilot was under a lot of personal stress. The radio connection had some static. The air traffic controller in Mexico City used slightly non-standard English phrasing. And on top of all that, it was a misty night, so visibility was poor.
So any one of those things on its own is no big deal.
Exactly. But after the crash, you can put all those factors on a timeline, and it looks like a clear equation. Fatigue plus static plus mist plus phrasing, crash.
It looks inevitable.
That's called retrodiction. Looking backwards, it's easy. But here's the billion-dollar question. Could you have predicted that crash the day before it happened?
No, absolutely not.
And why not? Because on any given day, thousands of pilots are tired. Thousands of radios have a little static. Thousands of air traffic controllers use slightly weird phrasing. Usually, nothing happens. The crash wasn't caused by any one of those things. It was caused by the exact alignment of all 5 of those common, trivial things at the exact same second.
And that alignment is random.
That alignment is totally random. You can't build a model that says when the radio has 10% static and the pilot has only slept 5 hours, a crash will occur. You'd be predicting thousands of crashes every single day.
So the argument is, we can explain the past because you can see the path the ball took. But we can't predict the future because we have no idea which of these millions of random trivial factors are going to align next to push the car off the cliff.
That's the argument. And that is a truly terrifying thought for an expert because it means their expertise isn't in seeing the future, it's just in telling a good story about the past.
But Tetlock didn't stop there. He said, okay, fine. Maybe the world really is chaos. But let's pretend for a minute that it isn't. Even if there were clear patterns, human beings are psychologically terrible at seeing them.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the rats.
Yes, the rats. This is probably the most humbling experiment in all of psychology.
I love this one because it just makes me feel so seen. So tell us about the T-maze experiment.
Okay, so researchers take a rat and put it in a simple T-shaped maze. At the start, it has to choose to go either left or right. There's food at the end of the arms, but the researchers have rigged the game.
How so?
The food placement is random, but it's biased. Over the long run, the food will be on the left 60% of the time and on the right 40% of the time. The actual sequence is random. It could be left, left, right, left, right, 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 left. But the overall probability is fixed, 60-40.
Okay, so how does the rat play this game?
The rat is a simple creature. It tries going left, gets food, tries going right, no food, tries left again, gets food. After a few tries, it figures out, hey, left seems to be the better bet, and then it just goes left. Every single time.
So by always choosing left, the rat gets the food 60% of the time.
Correct. The rat accepts that it cannot predict the random sequence, so it plays the best odds. It maximizes it, gets a 60% score. Now the fun part, they put Yale undergraduates in the exact same experiment.
Humans. Big brains. We are pattern-seeking animals.
We are addicted to patterns. The Yale students refuse to just go left every time. They think, there must be a system here. It can't be random. They start looking for complex patterns. Okay, it went left twice, then right once. Maybe the pattern is LLR, or maybe it's alternating. They try to predict the exact sequence. They try to guess the 40% of the time it's on the right.
They're trying to outsmart the randomness.
And because they're trying to match the randomness, they inevitably get it wrong. Their overall accuracy drops. The humans in this experiment usually score about 52%.
So the rat beats the Yale student. The rat wins. And the rat wins because the rat is humble enough to accept randomness. The human loses because the human is arrogant. We are what Tetlock calls deterministic thinkers. We cannot accept ambiguity. We see a few random dots and our brain immediately connects them into a picture that isn't really there. We invent a story to explain the noise.
Okay, let's just recap the full case for the skeptics, because it's really strong. Number one, the world is ontologically chaotic. That's the butterfly effect, and pulleys earn.
Right. Randomness rules.
Number two, other people are inherently unpredictable because of game theory. That's the Sherlock versus Moriarty problem.
You can't outthink an outthinker.
And number three, even if there was a clear pattern in the chaos, our own brains would overcomplicate it and miss it anyway. That's the rat versus Yale.
You put it all together and it seems pretty hopeless.
It really does. It makes me think, the dart-throwing chimp was right all along. Why even bother running the tournament?
Well, that's the scientific spirit, isn't it? You don't just stop at the theory, you have to test it. You have to collect the data. So Tetlock launched these massive forecasting tournaments to see if anyone, any human expert, could consistently beat the chimp.
And this wasn't just a small weekend project.
Oh no, this was a massive undertaking. 284 experts participated. These were highly educated people, PhDs, people with long careers in government service, think tanks, and it ran for over 15 years, collecting almost 28,000 individual predictions.
Well, these were specific predictions, right?
Yeah.
You didn't let them get away with vague stuff like the economy will probably get better.
No, he pinned them down. The questions were specific and falsifiable. Will GDP growth in Brazil exceed 2% by the end of 1998? Yes or no? Will Quebec secede from Canada by 1995? Yes or no? And critically, they had to attach a probability to it. They couldn't just say yes. They had to say, I'm 80% confident.
Okay, so the moment of truth.
Yeah.
All that data collected, how did they do? Did the humans beat random guessing?
The results were, well, they were complicated. To really understand them, we have to look at two different ways of keeping score. The first is calibration, and the second is discrimination.
Let's start with calibration. I think this might be the most useful concept for our listeners to take away from this whole deep dive. What is it?
Calibration is, simply put, knowing what you know. It's a measure of your intellectual self-awareness. If you say there is a 40% chance of something happening, then over the long run, things you give a 40% chance to should happen 40% of the time.
The best analogy I've ever heard for this is the weather app on your phone.
That's a perfect analogy. If your weather app says there's an 80% chance of rain today and it doesn't rain, you get mad. You think the app is broken.
Right. Stupid app. It was wrong.
But that's not how probability works. If you look at the data over a whole year, and on the 100 days where the app said 80% chance of rain, it rained on exactly 80 of them. That app is perfectly calibrated. The fact that it didn't rain on your specific picnic day doesn't mean the probability was wrong. It just means you were in the 20%.
So with that in mind, were the experts well calibrated?
No, they were terrible. They were systematically wildly overconfident.
In what way?
When experts said they were 100% certain that something would happen, it only actually happened about 80% of the time.
Wow.
I mean, think about that gap. That 20% gap is huge. If your doctor says, I'm 100% sure this surgery will work, and 1 out of every 5 patients dies on the table, That is a catastrophic failure of calibration.
So on the measure of calibration, they lost to the chimp.
They lost badly. The chimp, in a way, is perfectly calibrated because it knows nothing. It effectively assigns 50-50 to everything, or just random odds. The experts thought they knew everything, so they were constantly assigning 100% or 0% to things, and they were wrong way too often.
Okay, that's depressing. What about the other measure? Discrimination.
Discrimination is different. This is the ability to sort the maybes from the no-ways. Can you at least tell that a full-scale nuclear war is less likely than a modest tax cut passing Congress?
So basic reality testing.
Basically. And here, the experts did beat the chimp.
Well, thank God for that.
Right. A chimp throwing darts treats nuclear war and a tax cut as equally probable outcomes. Humans, even bad forecasters, have enough basic knowledge to say, okay, nuclear war is a very rare event. So experts aren't completely useless. They understand the basic layout of the board. They just don't know where the pieces are going to move next.
But then Tetlock threw in another challenger, right? The algorithm.
This was the real sting in the tail. He compared the experts' performance to a few very simple, mindless algorithms. One of them was called case-specific extrapolation.
Which is a fancy name for what?
It's a fancy name for a very dumb rule. It basically just says, whatever is happening now will probably keep happening. If the economy grew by 2% last year, just predict it will grow by 2% this year. If a conflict has been simmering for 10 years, predict it will continue to simmer.
The status quo bot.
The status quo bot. And it beat the experts in almost every category over almost every time horizon.
That is just humiliating. I mean, you spend your entire life getting a PhD, studying the complex nuances of international fiscal policy, and a bot that just says, same as last year, beats you at your own game.
It really speaks to the power of inertia in complex systems. Most of the time, radical change doesn't happen. Things tend to stay the same. Experts are always looking for the big turning point, the drama, the next big thing. The bot just bets on inertia. And most of the time, inertia wins.
But I think the most shocking comparison, and this is the one that really challenges our entire education system and our idea of what expertise even is, was the expert versus dilettante comparison.
Yes, this is the diminishing marginal returns finding, and it is so counterintuitive. Tetlock compared the true specialists, the people who lived and breathed a specific topic, like Japanese monetary policy, against what he called dilettantes.
And who were the dilettantes?
These were just smart people, generalists. Think of an attentive reader of the New York Times. Someone who keeps up with the world, knows the basics of what's going on, but they're not a deep specialist in any one area.
And what happened?
The specialists didn't win. In fact, in many cases, the dilettantes forecasting outside their area of expertise did better than the specialists forecasting inside theirs.
How is that possible? How can knowing more be bad for you?
It's the overconfidence trap. If you know every single tiny detail about the internal politics of the French Parliament, you can construct a very convincing, very complex, very elegant story about why a specific bill is definitely going to pass. You fall in love with your own beautiful story.
You start seeing signals in what is actually just noise.
Exactly. The dilettante, who knows less, doesn't get bogged down in those details. They just look at the big picture and say, the party in power usually wins these votes, and they turn out to be right more often.
So deep expertise gives you the powerful illusion of certainty, but it doesn't actually grant you better accuracy.
That's the finding. It can lead to what's called epistemic closure. You get trapped inside your own bubble of knowledge, and you can't see the world clearly anymore.
This is painting a really bleak picture. It sounds like the final verdict is just fire all the pundits, install a same as last year bot, and call it a day. But Tetlock didn't end on that hopeless note. He found a ray of hope in the data.
That is the key. The averages were bad. The overall picture was grim. But within that data, there was a subset of people who consistently beat the chimp. And they even consistently beat the simple algorithms. The question was, what made them different?
It wasn't their politics, right? Liberals weren't better than conservatives.
No, it wasn't their politics, it wasn't their IQ, it was their style of thinking.
And to explain this, Tetlock borrowed a wonderful metaphor from the philosopher Isaiah Berlin, the hedgehog and the fox.
The hedgehog knows one big thing, the fox knows many little things.
Let's really profile these two characters, because I think everyone listening will immediately recognize the hedgehogs in their life, maybe even in their own mirror.
The hedgehog is the big idea person. They have a grand theory of everything. Maybe they're a die-hard libertarian who believes that free markets solve every problem. Maybe they're a devout Marxist who believes that class struggle explains all of history. Maybe they're a climate doomer who believes civilization is on the verge of total collapse.
They have one big hammer And every single problem in the world looks like a nail.
That's a perfect way to put it. They are decisive. They are confident. They speak in exclamation points. When they look at the news, they filter every single event through that one big idea. If a piece of data fits their theory, they seize on it and say, "See, I told you so."
And if the data contradicts their theory,
They dismiss it. It's a fluke, it's an anomaly, it's a conspiracy by their enemies. They never, ever question the big idea itself.
and how did the hedgehogs do in the forecasting tournament?
They were terrible. They were by far the worst forecasters in the entire study. They had the worst calibration and the worst discrimination scores. They were the most overconfident and the least accurate.
They make these huge, bold predictions.
Right. The euro is going to collapse within 12 months. And then when it doesn't happen, they don't update their worldview. They don't say, maybe the Eurozone is more resilient than I thought. They just move the goalposts. Okay, it's going to collapse in the next 12 months.
Okay, so that's the hedgehog. Now let's talk about the fox.
The fox is a completely different animal. The fox is eclectic. They don't have one grand theory. They have a messy toolbox filled with different ideas. They might look at a problem and say, well, from an economic perspective, you could argue X, but if you look at the cultural history of the region, that suggests Y, and the latest polling data points towards Z.
They sound indecisive. They sound kind of wishy-washy.
To a hedgehog, they sound incredibly wishy-washy. They use phrases like, on the one hand, but on the other hand. They say, however, and it depends a lot. But here's the superpower of the fox. They update their beliefs.
This is Bayesian updating, right?
That's the technical term for it. If a fox thinks there's a 60% chance of something happening and then a new piece of news comes in that contradicts that belief, the fox says, okay, interesting, maybe now it's only a 55% chance. They make small, constant adjustments. They don't have an ego attachment to being right. They treat their beliefs like a hypothesis to be tested, not a sacred religion to be defended.
And the foxes won the tournament.
Consistently, they crushed the hedgehogs, they were better calibrated, they were better at spotting the turning points in history because their minds weren't blinded by a single rigid ideology. They could see how contradictory forces can balance each other out and lead to surprising outcomes.
But this leads us to the great and tragic media paradox. And this explains so clearly why my TV screen is always filled with the people who are objectively the worst at their jobs.
It's a fundamental mismatch between what is accurate and what is entertaining. I mean, think about what makes good television. You have a 3-minute segment on a news show. Do you want to book the fox, who's going to say, well, it's a very complicated situation. There are 3 main variables to consider, and my best guess is a probability of roughly 60-40, but that's highly sensitive to future oil prices.
Snooze. Click. I'm changing the channel. That's boring.
It's incredibly boring. You want the hedgehog. You want the person who's going to slam their fist on the table and shout, the market is going to crash next week, sell everything you own right now. That creates drama. That creates fear. That creates engagement. That keeps you watching through the commercial break.
So the media, by its very nature, selects for confidence. But the research shows that confidence is inversely correlated with accuracy. The more confident and certain someone sounds, the less likely they are to actually be right.
That is the big, sad rule of thumb. If you see an expert on TV who has absolutely no doubt in their voice, who speaks in pure certainties, you should probably bet against them. The foxes sound boring and unsure, so they don't get invited back. The hedgehogs are consistently wrong, but they're incredibly entertaining, so they become media stars.
Okay, so we know the problem. Experts, specifically hedgehog-style experts, are overconfident, poorly calibrated, and often wrong. The world is messier than we want to admit, but we still have to make decisions. We can't just throw up our hands and say, it's all chaos. So how do we fix this? How do we actually move into that meliorist future you talked about?
The answer lies in changing the game itself. We have to move from the world of punditry to the world of tournaments. We have to start rigorously keeping score.
And step one seems to be getting rid of all the weasel words.
Oh, the weasel words. They are the absolute poison of good judgment. Words like a significant chance or a distinct possibility, might, could, likely.
Because they mean nothing. They're totally subjective. If I say, there is a distinct possibility of rain today, and it rains, I get to say, see, I told you. And if it doesn't rain, I get to say, well, I only said it was a possibility. I can never be proven wrong.
You can never be wrong. It's a perfect defense mechanism. Tetlock argues that the first, most important step is we must force people, analysts, politicians, ourselves, to use numbers, to use probabilities.
Yeah.
If you think war is coming, don't say war is likely. Say, I believe there is a 75% chance of a major military conflict in this region within the next 6 months.
Because once you put a number on it, you can't hide. We can calculate your Breyer score.
Exactly. The Breyer score is like the Gulf score of forecasting. Lower is better. If you assign a 70% probability to an event and it happens, you get a good score. If you assign 70% and it doesn't happen, you get a significant penalty. Over time, we can track everyone's Breyer score and see who actually knows what they're talking about and who is just full of hot air.
And this whole idea evolved into the Good Judgment Project, right? This is the next phase, the search for super forecasters.
Yes. This is really the happy ending to the story, the proof of meliorism. After identifying the foxes, Tetlock and his colleagues wanted to see if you could actually train people to be better, and they found that you absolutely can. They found these super forecasters.
And these weren't necessarily the people with PhDs in political science.
No, that's the amazing part. They were from all walks of life, pharmacists, retirees, computer programmers, ballroom dancers. But they were all natural foxes. They were curious, open-minded, and comfortable with numbers and uncertainty.
So what did they do differently that made them super?
The biggest thing was that they worked in teams. This is so crucial. Hedgehogs work alone. They preach from their mountaintop. Foxes hunt in packs. The super forecasting teams would debate and challenge each other. Why do you think that's an 80% chance? I think it's more like 60%. Have you considered this piece of data? I think you're showing some confirmation bias there. They engaged in what's called adversarial collaboration.
I love this concept for depolarizing politics. Instead of our current cable news debates, we should just have public betting markets.
Imagine that. Imagine if, instead of a presidential debate where the candidates just shout pre-packaged talking points at each other, they had to make specific, falsifiable probability bets on the outcomes of their own policies.
If my tax cut is passed, I bet with 80% certainty that GDP will rise by at least 3% within 2 years.
And then 2 years later, we check the score, we see who is right. It would completely revolutionize political accountability. It forces you to be intellectually honest. It forces you to confront the limits of your own knowledge.
Okay, so let's bring this all home for the listener. The person who is just trying to make sense of the news or maybe trying to make better decisions in their own business or their own life. What is the big takeaway from all of this?
I think the single biggest takeaway is humility. It's to find and embrace your inner fox.
Be wary of certainty.
Be deeply, deeply wary of certainty. If you feel 100% sure about something, especially something complex and in the future, that feeling should be a warning sign, a red flag. You should stop and ask yourself, what new piece of information would convince me that I am wrong?
And if the answer is nothing?
If the answer is nothing, then you have left the realm of reason and you have entered the realm of faith. And that's fine for religion, but it's a disaster for decision-making.
And check your own calibration. You can do this yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Try it. It's a great exercise. Next time you make a casual prediction to a friend, I think our team will win this weekend, or I think this stock is going to go up, privately, write down a percentage. I'm 60% sure. Then, 6 months later, go back and look at all your predictions. See how often your 60% actually happened.
You'll probably find you're pretty overconfident.
We all are. It's the default human condition. But the good news is you can train yourself out of it. You can learn to be a better calibrated thinker.
It's so interesting. We started this whole deep dive talking about how the dart-throwing chimp was this huge insult to human intelligence. But now I'm starting to think maybe it was actually a gift.
How do you mean?
Well, it shattered the dangerous illusion that we are gods who can see the future. It forced us to confront the reality that the world is chaotic and that our minds are flawed instruments. And it's only by admitting we are more like the chimp than we want to believe that we can actually begin the hard work of getting smarter.
I think that's exactly right. The smartest person in the room isn't the one who claims to know exactly what will happen next. The smartest person in the room is the one who says, I don't know for sure, but here are the odds.
And that's a much more satisfying place to land, I think. Knowing the odds is so much better than pretending to know the future.
It's the only honest way to navigate a complex world.
Well, on that note, I predict with about 95% certainty that our listeners are going to have a lot to think about after this one.
I will definitely take that bet.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Stay curious, stay foxy, and maybe watch out for those falling darts.
Indeed. Until next time.